Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session on the rich legacy of Bates Athletics. I'm Charlie Mattis, class of 73, and this is brought to you by the class of 73, and we really appreciate your all being here. And so let's start out with the Bates cheer. Well, I don't know it either, so I guess we can get on with the show. We don't have much time anyway. Yeah, yeah. Wildcats. Oh, Bobcats. Yeah, I got it. Okay. So um, this session was a result of Ira and Ira Waldman is my partner in crime here, having a conversation last fall around the time of the 50th anniversary of the greatest football game in the history of Bates College and probably the whole world. And after a little bit of back and forth, we said, at reunion, we really ought to have a session that talks about all the athletics at Bates and the traditions that have been established. And so that's basically why we're here. But then we thought to ourselves, well, of all the representatives that we could get to participate on this, you notice there's a little bit of a gender bias here. And so we were thinking, well, the second part of our program really should talk about how Title IX really transformed athletics at Bates and gave women a lot more opportunities. Not that they didn't have sports, but sometimes it wasn't really emphasized as much. And so then we said, okay, well, after we do that, we want to hear from some of the other classes, what we refer to as the 3s and 8s. Who's the 3 and 8 here besides 73? Yeah, good, that's great. And so that's the program today. I just want to make one note. Ira has done a tremendous amount of work on this. Every once in a while, he'd send me an email and I'd comment, but I'll tell you, he's really the one that's responsible for this. And he owes a debt of gratitude from all of us. So I think that's all I want to say. Ira, take it away.
Okay. One of the people who I wanted to have on the panel was Peter Slavinsky, who did not go to Bates, but he spent a lot of his childhood at Bates, the son of Walt Slavinsky. So I asked, he had a doctor's appointment, couldn't make it. I said, Peter, could you send me a story? Because he loves to tell really great stories. The other day, he sent me not just a single story, but he sent me sort of a summary of his life as a what he called a faculty brat. And it was so moving to me that I wanted to read that as our introduction. So let me just read it. I was a faculty brat who had the privilege of growing up on the Bates campus, running from school across Russell Street to watch Tom Freeman pitch, the greatest pitcher in Bates College history, sitting right there. And Howie Vandersay play first base against the University of Maine in baseball in 1963, and Webb Harrison on the football field. Finishing my homework early so I could watch Howie Alexander, Jim Alden, and Mark Shulkin play basketball against Bowdoin in 1968. Watching Stork, Joe Burke, Ralph Bayek, and me play football, especially when they played AIC on Parents' Weekend in 1972. Watching Roscoe Lee block and run in football games and then being mesmerized by Roscoe at night when I watched him play in ref intramural basketball games. Watching the inspiring daily practices of John Emerson, Joe Bradford, Joe Gruby, Hank McIntyre, Paul Oporowski, Tom Leonard, Rick DeBrune, Jim Leahy, Steve Fillo, and David Sharm as they ran for Bates in the 70s, most of whom are here today. Watching Larry Wood and Chuck James, also here, as they lifted weights and threw for the Bates track team. Seeing Bill Lavallee set records while sprinting over the hurdles in '63. Listening to the skillful announcing of Dave McNaughton at basketball games and alumni gym in the 70s. Watching Lloyd Jagat on our program come back from the Army to run for Bates after serving in combat in Vietnam. And he concludes, Bates athletes and sports teams, the smallest college enrollment in most of the contests, usually the physically smaller team in the competition, competing with brains, courage, and impressive sportsmanship. Watching Bates athletics was like watching a clinic on poise, intelligence, guts, and most of all, class. Thank you for being the best role models and sports heroes a boy could have. I mean, now to get going, really, I'd like to introduce the moderator of the program and the boss, my daughter Shayna, class of 2008. Shayna is a production something for reality TV shows for ATS. She's based in London. If you've ever seen American Ninja Warriors, she produces the European version of American Ninja Warriors. And so I think she can handle all of the warriors on our panels. So without further ado, let me hand the mic to Shayna and we'll get going.
You can keep that mic. You can keep that mic and share it with them. Hi, everyone. I'm Shayna Waldman, like my father said, class of 2008, so it is also my reunion. We are going to get started right now with the 1973 memories. I'm going to start it off with Mark Harris. You played football at Bates, and you started as a defensive end in your freshman year. Will you tell us about the game against Trinity that year, the game which would be the football team's last victory before the infamous 25-game losing streak that Bates football went on to have?
Lots of losses to talk about. Anyways, thank you. I was not an extemporaneous preacher, so I wrote mine out. I had the good fortune of being a starting defensive end on the football team for 3 years, playing in 24 games. My biggest regret about football is that I decided not to play my senior year because of some misguided idea that I would devote more time to my studies. What was I thinking? My greatest memory is recovering 2 fumbles against Trinity in the 3rd game of freshman year. We went on to a last-minute victory. I can still see the ball bouncing around the backfield and visualize pouncing upon it, which fortunately I did. Sandy Nesbitt, who was both fast and elusive, got hurt that day, a great running back, and we didn't win another game for 3 years until senior year. I have various memories of our opponents. I particularly remember Bruce Laird, the AIC wonder, who went on to a pro career with the Colts and the Chargers. He was impossible to tackle, having incredible power and speed. At least I touched him as he flew by. I also remember the giant bed sheets hanging from the dorms at Middlebury, emblazoned with the words, Master Bates. What I can say that is enduring is how important my teammates were to me. The fun we had on road trips, watching scary movies in the hotels, drinking bug juice while we all choked on it. I actually liked the stuff. We enjoyed being together, and what I remember best about our losing streak is we never got down on ourselves. We always thought we could win, and often nearly did. I remember an especially close game at Tufts when it was 100 degrees in the shade. Nothing summarizes the relationship more for me than an incident which occurred when we were playing, of course, AIC. Who else? Being a defensive player, Coach Hatch used us as a kickoff team. On one particular kickoff, the play had ended, but an overzealous AIC player chose not to realize this. I was standing unaware of his looming presence, but in a matter of seconds, his helmet smashed into my chest and sent me flying. I literally had no breath left. I remember one teammate, Peter Meza, yelling at me to get up. But true compassion was shown by one of the hardest working football players of them all, Joe Burke, who sprinted onto the field and helped me to my feet and supported me as we staggered off. That was Bates athletics to me. The people I played with, the relationships we had, and the camaraderie we felt. That was made it all memorable and important.
Ralph, I'm going to come to you next. You also played football. Can you tell us about the moment you ended that 25-game losing streak with a D2 American International College, or I should say against? You were named to the All-ECAC football team as a result.
Thank you very much. There are gods that watch over football. On October 21st, 1972, these gods gave us a collective smile and a collective pass to make up for the previous 25 games, which one way or another, either close or not close, had gone down in flames. I'll be brief on this one. The AIC coach and my dad went to high school together. My dad was up for Parents' Weekend, went to see Milt Pepple the day before. He goes, Milt, take it easy on these guys. They'd lost 25. And okay, Frank, we will. I wonder what he thought 24 hours later as they headed back to Springfield. Boy, they must be able to hear a pin drop on that bus. But as far as the field goal goes, I was having a horrible day kicking. I had missed an extra point. We went for a fake after the second touchdown where Ira made a tremendous catch in the corner of the end zone. My holder, Bob Listowski, was designed to throw to Ira. There was two rushers. I ran right in between them. I should have blocked either one or the other. I missed them both. Listowski got crushed, but was able to complete the pass anyway. So when it came down to the kick, I knew I could make it. The question is, would I make it? But I kept one thing in my head. It's like golf, which I don't play. Keep your head down. Keep your head down. Snap was perfect from Frank Highland. Great hold by Laz, as always. And I didn't see the ball go through, and Laz was going, you got it, Ralphie, you got it. So we ran off the field, there's one thing that stuck in my head. There's still 6.5 minutes left in this game. AIC had turned the ball over at that point 5 times, which is why the game was even close. In my head, I just had them rumbling down the field like, 80 yards in 5 plays to take the lead. Fortunately, we were able to hold on downs, and then quarterback Dancing Dave Dysonchuk was able to scramble for a couple of first downs. So as the clock was winding down under 2 minutes, minute and a half, as I started to get closer, all of a sudden it dawned on me that this thing might actually happen, which is what you see on the left-hand side of the screen there. And I practiced kicking when I was a kid in the backyard. I made some cheesy goalposts, and that was kind of my thing for a long time. So I guess for one shining moment in time, it paid off.
Just a couple more comments about the AIC game, and this was Bob Hatch, our coach, quoted by Joe Buchanan in the Boston Globe. It was a big crowd, and everybody was pretty excited. It was Parents' Weekend, and I've never seen anything like this before, not even when we knocked off Maine a long time ago. We had mothers of players on the squad climbing over snow fences in their fur coats to run out and congratulate their sons. The fences are 14 feet high. Well, maybe they weren't that high. Or as ABC Sports put it, the victory bell rang loud and long October 21st, and the parties and celebrations lasted into the evening. And for the seniors, Bill Conley, Roscoe Lee, Guy Roberge, Andy Carr, Joe Burke, Ralph Bayek, Steve Eldridge, Ira Waldman, most of whom played in 3 winning football games during their freshman year, there was a tremendous sense of relief. It really was an existential moment.
So Mel, I'm going to come to you next. You also played football, a bit heavy on the football team here. You played with Roscoe Lee, and you guys were the only 2 African Americans on the football team your freshman year. Roscoe was the only one of the entire freshman class to letter that year, and the only 4-year letterman from your class. Could you tell us a bit about what it was like and the influence that you both had on campus?
Well, thank you, and good to see everyone here. And More than glad to talk about Roscoe. Uh, as stated, Roscoe, Lee, and I were the only two black players that freshman year when we came up to camp in August 1969. And Roscoe was from inner city Newark. And so, as you might imagine, going from Newark to the Lewiston, Auburn area was a bit of, as they say, kind of a culture shock. I came from Cape Cod, so I had a kind of an integrated background from about the 5th grade on. We won't talk about those earlier years living in the South that was segregated. But I was a little bit more adjusted to some things than maybe Roscoe. And so when we got here, basically, Roscoe and I were from, two different backgrounds. But as many of you can remember, during that time in the late 60s, there was a renaissance going on in a lot of black communities. And we found that Negro was no longer apropos. We were moving into an Afro-American kind of identity. There was a black identity that was manifested in language, in communities, in the Black Power sign. There were cultural changes that were going on. And so Roscoe and I were both, affected by those changes, being African-American young men. And so once we got here to campus, we knew that we had a bit of a cultural challenge ahead of us. But I think in many ways, the leadership that Roscoe showed on the field was really manifested because it came from a leadership that he had off field. The word that I would use to describe Roscoe as I got to know him is perhaps the $2 word gravitas, which is sort of a dignity, a seriousness that he carried about himself. And it was very infectious because if you're around him long enough, yes, he had a sense of humor. Yes, he could be as crazy and irreverent as anyone, but there was something about him that was very, very stable and inspiring. That would be another word I would use. Roscoe and I really bonded through a certain kind of friendship that would happen at being two of dozens of players two black players of dozens of players who were white. And in particular, there was an incident that happened in town that perhaps I might chat about a little bit later on. But what I wanted to do is to mention that not only on the field, but Roscoe became a leader off the field. And in that year, our freshman year, there were 16 black students, counting some of the students from Africa. And we decided that, and again, this is because of the times, that we would form an Afro-American society on campus that would allow us to engage the administration and at the same time give us a certain kind of collective identity that was very important at that time. So Roscoe became our leader of that Afro-American society. He was the one who took charge and represented us as we found ourselves talking individually and collectively to administration. One of the things that happened, I want to mention that I think was very significant in regards to that Afro-American society and its place on campus was that some of the things that we were urging, the administration did hear, they did listen. And James Carrigan, who was the dean at the time, became instrumental in organizing a trip to Atlanta University for 3 of the students in the Afro-American Society. It was Walter Toombs, Marilyn Nixon, and myself. And so the 3 of us went down with Carrigan to this conference on African American Studies. And we got a lot of information that we brought back to campus, and that information, really helped us to sort of grow roots in regards to our society, Afro-American society here at the Bates campus. Now, it wasn't all very serious. You know, there were those moments where we had time to just to be college kids, and in those moments of having parties on Saturday nights, Roscoe was a leader there as well. He was the person who, once he arrived, the party began. And there was a quote that one of our classmates, Pam Johnson, made. She said that in regards to Roscoe, whenever he was on the dance floor, he was a hellified dancer. He could move those hips. And full disclosure, I was looking at Pam's hips and not Roscoe's. That's another story we'll get to another time. When I spoke to Walter Toombs, who could not join us this time around, he said that in a statement that was also in the class yearbook, that Roscoe is my giant. And what he meant by that, and as he spoke for himself, but at the same time spoke for others, was that Roscoe was just one of those guys. And maybe all of you have had someone like that in your lives, that he just seemed to have carried himself in a kind of way that made him stand out. He was a leader on the field, he was a leader off the field, and he was a very good friend.
So we're going to switch over to basketball now. Brad, you participated in one of the biggest upsets in Bates basketball history. Could you tell us about that game and the banner contest that was held on the Return to Alumni Gym?
Well, in those days, there was no NESCAC League. We played a very eclectic schedule. A lot of Division I teams, about a third of our schedule. And we were in the Maine State Series, so we played Maine twice, Colby twice, and Bowdoin twice. UMaine had a good team that year in the Yankee Conference. They had beaten Connecticut, they had beaten Rhode Island at home. Sports Illustrated had said that the pit at the University of Maine was considered to be one of the 10 hardest places to win in for visiting teams. It's a great gym. There's only 3 gyms we played in during my time at Bates that had any excitement. Bates College was one, UMaine Orono was another, and Williams had a little pit back in those days. But you go to Colby, you go to Bowdoin, you go to these other places, they had big, beautiful gyms, there was nobody there. So we go up to UMaine, and they have 4 guys who are 6'7", and we had George Anders, and George Wigton says, well, what we're going to do, we're going to run a 3-man weave with our big guys and put the guards in the corner. Well, I'm a guard. I didn't want to really hear that. So I go down in the corner. Spider Jordan goes in the other corner. And we ran a 3-man weave with our star, Steve Keltonic, George Anders, Mike Edwards. You guys might remember some of these names. Danny Glennie. And we're hanging around. We're hanging around. We're hanging around. They're not taking us seriously. And we end up winning the game. 54-53. We did a real Bush move then. We cut the nets down, Steve, if you remember that. And he cut the nets down, fan. And I'll tell you how that came back to haunt us later. But anyway, it was 2 weeks later. We're coming into Bates, and you can see the picture of the gym. Isn't that a great picture of that gym? And we couldn't do that nowadays because our court was only 74 feet in those days, and to host NCAA tournaments, it has to be 84. So they've added 5 feet to each end, so you wouldn't be able to sit people on the floor. But it's a real tough place for teams to come in to play. And Maine came in, and they were fired up for the game. And if you look at the score there, I think it says 20-20. We hung around, we hung around, and we hung around, and we had a banner contest at halftime. I think, were you involved in that too? So that the equipment manager, Al Myers, was going to come out and he was going to rate the banners. And I don't know who won, but there's one that says UCLA, the Bates of the West. You know, they were all in tongue-in-cheek. And as so often happens when you're playing against a bigger team, you end up in foul trouble, and we ended up losing in the last 10 minutes of that game, but it was competitive. several years later, I was a high school coach for 35 years, and I was in the gym in Framingham, and UMaine was recruiting one of our players. And this big guy walks in the gym, and he comes across the floor, and he says, "Do you know who I am?" I said, "Oh, yeah, you're Peter Gavitt from UMaine." He says, "You should have never cut those nets down." I hadn't seen a game at Bates for 50 years. I went back this year. John Amos, Dave McNaughton, Mike Wilson, Steve Keltonic, a bunch of us came back to see this year's team. And it was minus 40-degree wind chill factor. If you remember, it was the coldest day in Maine in 10 years. And we were over in a hotel, and there was no heat in the hotel over in Auburn. And I said, I don't think anybody's going to come to this game. I think it's going to be a disappointment. They're playing Bowdoin. And good old Bates fans, we get to the game, and the place is packed. And the next day, they lose the game. Next day, they're playing Colby in an afternoon game. And I was hanging around the gym, and the Colby guys were shooting around. I said, you guys must be disappointed. You get that big, beautiful gym up in Waterville. You got to come down here and play in our gym. And two of them said to me, "Oh, no, this is our favorite game of the year. This is the only game where there's any kind of crowd excitement." So I'm saying this for the younger people. I'm so glad that we still have that facility. Sometimes, you overbuild a facility, and it just fits this campus, just the location and everything, in my opinion. And I know it needs new offices, and it needs upkeep and all that. It's almost 100 years old. But it is one of the great gyms. And interestingly, UMaine moved their games over to more of a field house, and they're now going back, and they're playing more of their games in that 3,000-seat arena up there, which is a treasure, in my opinion. Playing at Bates was great fun. Playing for George Wigton, he was a gentleman. George passed away this past year. The testimony was in the chapel, and we had tennis players, soccer players, squash players, basketball players. As a testament to what a gentleman he was. Not a yeller, not a screamer. He treated you like an adult. Thank you.
Okay, Lloyd, you ran cross country and track and field. Your teams had quite the run, pun, during your tenure at Bates. Tell us about that period of competitive excellence.
Gladly. So my time at Bates went from the period of 1966 to 1973. And during that time, the cross-country team had 7 consecutive winning seasons. We were state champions 4 out of 5 times. Ironically enough, the year we lost the 5th championship was the same day that the football team beat AIC. We also were undefeated in 1969. And I know some of you might be thinking, well, 7 consecutive seasons, what's the big deal? So you have to put this in perspective. The 35 years prior to 1966, the cross-country team had a total winning number of seasons 6. They had the same number of seasons in which they didn't win a single meet. And it probably would have been worse, except for the fact that the sport was canceled entirely 4 times in the 1940s and 5 times in the 1950s. So to win 7 consecutive, or have 7 consecutive winning seasons was totally unprecedented for Bates College. The runners were also successful on the track. 50 years later, John Emerson's 4:10 mile is still ranked as the number 6 time in over history in Bates College. We also had the 72 2-mile relay and the 73 distance medley relay are also rated in the top 10. So with that kind of history, that's exactly why Joe Gromowski later termed that period and those runners as the beginning of the Bates distance dynasty. Thank you.
So Larry, you did track and field, and you are a weight throw record holder. Larry, you were a part of the great Bates throwing tradition. How did Walt Slavinsky, the legendary cross-country and track coach, influence your throwing development?
Sorry, my knees can only take so much. One of the things that has been said to me at least 4 times this weekend is that a current legacy stands on the shoulders of those who went before. And if you have watched Bates track and field in the last 20 years, it's a tremendous legacy, a tremendous series of accomplishments. And so the question came to me, and my accomplishments were really are rooted in Walt Slavinsky. And not only personally, but Walt coached my high school coach, Carl Peterson. And so my entire track career is rooted in Walt's teaching. And Walt was truly an outstanding coach. Walt was not a technician in the area of throws, but he was a master of competitive guile. And from the very beginning, his objective was simply to win the meet. In whatever situation, in whatever position you were in, just win. So my senior year, shot putting was not, David, my favorite. Senior year, indoor championships, Bowdoin had a freshman recruit who was a giant. He was massive, and Walt said to me, "Get into his head." I said, well, that's the best I can do, because he's 1.5 feet taller than I am, and he weighs 100 pounds more. Well, in warm-ups for the shot put, I unleashed a major warm-up throw, and the young man took it to heart, and I beat him in the championship. And outdoors, he paid me back because he blew me out of the water, which he should have done indoors. But Walt had put it into my head that it was more important to compete in that moment than anything else, and that was the accomplishment. Walt was a consummate competitor. In his first 5 years of coaching at Bates, during the track season, he took on his entire team, one man against his entire track team. And it wasn't until year 5, when he actually got beat for the first time, that he gave it up. He had been an All-American in both football and track and field at Syracuse, and he was a consummate competitor. But as Peter said, he was also an incredible gentleman. And that impact on my life and my coaching career is just inestimable. So much so that one of the things that I really am deeply proud of Walt for is he understood what was happening in the world. When we started, there were no beards, there were no long hair, there was a very strict dress code, and Walt enforced that dramatically. There was no Title IX, there was no women's track and field program, and I confess that we had a pretty good life on men's track and field. But Walt knew what was coming, and Walt began some very subtle integration into his thinking and into Bates track and field. And one of the first things he did was he asked my fiance at the time, now my wife Susan, to do the announcing for one season of our track meets. And it was a small gesture that Walt knew what was coming, saw what was happening, and then was a participant in accomplishing it. Then the last part of that is, and I'll share this with you, outside of Walt's wife and daughters, my wife was the first woman to ever make a road trip with Bates men's track and field team when we went to Burlington, Vermont for our dual meet. legacies are important. The people who go before you really create the foundation for who you are. And the great accomplishments that you guys have done in this century really stand on the shoulders of Walt Slavinsky, and I'm proud to have known him.
All right. Rob, you play tennis. What was it like to play tennis for your coach, Bob Flynn?
First of all, I've got to say that I've just been watching all of you and been inspired by my colleagues to my left and my right. And tennis was a very different sport than team sports here at Bates at the time. When I came in from high school and had done exceedingly well, I expected that I was going to come and partake in a platform that was going to take me to the next level. I discovered that tennis was a non-sport here in 1970. That combined with there was no fall program, and as Brad said to me before we got started, remember those tennis courts? They were nothing short of horrible. There were 3 macadam courts, one outside, and the others were supposedly clay courts, but they were mud. And Larry spoke about legacy. There wasn't any legacy with the men's varsity tennis team. In fact, and the swelling of moments, because when we arrived in August and very shortly thereafter, the school paused with Kent State. And as an individual, I did not have team members like all of you did. There was a grand total of one other classmate of mine that tried out from the class of '73, Tom Rocket Mahard, and myself. And the other players were not committed tennis players. There was Bob McKenna, who actually flunked out, and several times he appeared on the court fairly suffering from the night before. And we had my second year, to sum this up, I was the only returning member of those 8 people. And there are more people here in this room today than ever witnessed a Bates College tennis match when I was playing. And we had some good support from Roger Bill, because there was a court there right below, and they knew to crank up the stereo when we were playing. And finally, the opposing player said, "Come on, you got to do something." So you heard about discipline and just respect by coaches that these men have spoken about. We had somebody that probably treated us like we were a club sport. He had a fantastic personality, but he had failing grades as a tennis coach. And so how many tennis players played varsity that are here in the room? Anybody? Okay, hey guy. And tennis is all about fundamentals and drills. We had none. It was inspired by myself, and that didn't happen my freshman year, and I woke up in my sophomore year when suddenly we had the likes of Dirk Visser show up on campus. He was from Spain, and Spaniards on clay are still the world's best, and we suddenly had a man that could play tennis. Wow, that's pretty cool. And then to my right is my friend Steve, and one of his soccer teammates was Pat McInerney. And Patrick played a great game, and Jim Cation, another sophomore, and Mark Delaney, another. These were all freshmen when I was a sophomore. So suddenly I got buoyed up by 4 sophomore men. Sherry, I wish Marilyn Olson could have played on our team. You know, there was like 3 people in my class that played any sort of serious tennis. Flash forward, with this movement, I felt I had to take it upon myself to make change. I really spoke out about the quality of the experience that we were having. And you could see it change in our junior year and into our senior year. There were 17 candidates to make 9 positions my senior year. And maybe my contribution to tennis was I worked part-time at a local tennis club, and I had the opportunity to close down the place at 10 o'clock, and nobody played after 8 o'clock at night. And Adam Lee, who is Lee Auto Malls here in Maine, his dad played tennis quite competitively, and I asked if we could use the courts after 8. And so we finally had a place to play because, as you asked me, what were the facilities like here? The facilities were like this. When the snow melted and the courts were dry, we could go out and hit. And when the frost was in the air, we stopped playing because the Gray Athletic Center was not a tennis facility in the wintertime, and neither was Alumni Gym on wood floor. And so we really were hung out to dry. And meanwhile, I'm in awe of all my colleagues here just pushing and pushing, and you guys had all the support in the world. And, but there's a good ending to this, is that
Oh, good, an ending.
Coach Wigden took over the reins of Bates Tennis in 1974. And Wigden brought the same elements to tennis that he did with basketball and the other sports they coached. And you began to see recruiting happen and attracting other Bates tennis players coming to Bates to play. And then it reached a pinnacle when Paul Gastonguay came here to Bates in the 1980s. And then suddenly there's this guy named Bud Schultz that shows up on campus and ultimately becomes a professional tennis player. And now Bates is a serious, serious force in men's and women's competitive tennis. So it's been quite a transformation.
Thanks so much, Rob. Steve, you were quite energized by the Bates-Bowdoin sports rivalry. How did it play out during your soccer career?
Pretty well. I'm a university professor, been one for many years. I have to stand up and walk around, but this is the shirt jersey I wore against all the opponents, including Bowdoin, for the first 3 years. Finally, we got new uniforms and we got rid of this crappy uniform. Why do I think the Bates-Bowdoin rivalry is really important and was the most important? We played against some of the same teams that you did. We had the Maine series, so we played a lot of big schools, including Boston University and Bridgeport, et cetera. But Bowdoin was always the most important. It wasn't particularly for me. I grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut, which is a really good town. We had a great public high school. It was also a wealthy town, and so many of my friends went to private school. And my parents went to Bates, I went to Bates, my sister went to Bates, some of the kids went to Bates. I thought about going to Bowdoin, interviewed at Bowdoin, but I came to Bates, early decision. My mother said, yeah, that's where you're going. So here I am. And I look at Bates and Bowdoin, and this is the way I looked at it then, maybe it changed now, I think it has. Bates was basically made up of public high school New England kids, right? There was a smattering of international students, there's some kids from out of New England. Bowdoin was made up of private school, wealthy kids. That's the way I saw it, and that's the way I competed against them. There are 2 friends of mine, well, one friend and one non-friend, who also were from West Hartford, ended up at Bowdoin. And one guy was a great guy, and after the games, we'd shake hands, we'd talk, we'd say, good game, nice job, sorry that you lost. I was like, we lost most of the time, actually, unfortunately. The other guy was a jerk. So here's the story I want to tell. And I've got proof from the Bates Daily that most of what I'm going to tell right now is true. At Bates, our junior year, we were playing Bowdoin here, and it was a tie game at halftime. The game was very chippy. There's lots of pushing and shoving, a lot of late tackles. And at one point, the straw broke the camel's back, and one of our guys, one of our biggest guys, pushed one of their littlest guys. That's a story that's told, which may be true. And that started a melee. And most of the Bowdoin people ran onto the field. At that point in time, I was actually getting a short blow. I was standing next to Coach Wigton, and I started to run out because I was going to get my shots in. This was my opportunity, right, to take a shot. And Coach Wigton, who was a big guy, grabbed my arm, which was a good thing. And so I didn't get in the melee. The melee was mostly, it was like non-hockey, was no punches were thrown. There was an alleged headbutting by a Bowdoin player on one of our players. Not for sure, we know that's true. And in all of this, on the sideline stood a very tall guy with a soccer ball in his hand. I can't remember if he had just had it in his hand or he was actually shagging the balls when they went out of bounds. But in all this melee, this gentleman, a basketball player at Bates College, chose that opportunity as a Bowdoin player was running to enter into the melee. He threw what I think is the best pass ever seen at Bates College. He nailed the guy on a dead run, plunked him, and that guy just went, stopped dead in his tracks. That guy's Steve Keltonic right there. So one of the reasons that I was glad that I didn't go on the field and get in the melee was that in an earlier game that year when we played Clark, I was thrown out of my second game that year. We didn't have red cards at that point in time, but whatever reason the referee decided he heard enough from me and threw me out. And we have the new Bates historian in the room here, and I want to go on record that I believe that I have been thrown out of the most soccer games at Bates College, in Bates College history. And I want to get into the record books. I didn't get as many goals or as many assists, but I think I got the record for getting thrown out of games. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Bill, so you also played soccer at Bates,
Yes, I did.
but then you were the only one from your graduating class to go on to the military.
Right. To my surprise and the great surprise of my classmates, I joined the Marine Corps after I graduated from Bates. And I think what really attracted me, well, maybe not attracted is a good word for it, but what appealed to me to go in the Marine Corps is really the structure and everything. And to me, athletics at Bates, it was structured, that you had to be there at a certain time, and I liked that. Plus the camaraderie, too, that I remember the first day, I never visited Bates before I came here, and I remember my dad and my brother dropped me off, and we'll see you at Thanksgiving, okay? And I was walking around, and I saw Donnie Geisler. He was the captain. I had known him before that and everything, and his quote to me, well, look what the cat dragged in here. But it was like an instant family when you got over here, because the first day of practice, you got to meet, you know, your teammates and everything, and it wasn't like you were lost. And I can only imagine how tough it was for somebody else that, you know, the first time you're a freshman up over, you don't know anybody, and you show up, and what am I supposed to do? But this was, like I say, an instant family. And, you know, the friendships, you know, for 50 years later, that you still have the friendship, the instant family. And the same thing with the Marine Corps that, you know, well, as a matter of fact, I was in the Marine Corps for about 6 or 7 years in my initial contract. And I got out, I stayed in the reserves. But then I said, you know, I didn't get out because I was upset with the Marine Corps. I just wanted to try something different. And when I got out in the business world, it was like, geez, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, where, you know, your word is your bond and all the other stuff that happens out in the business. So we went back in the Marine Corps, and 27 years later, I retired from the Marine Corps. But I really think that being at Bates and sports and just the camaraderie, the structure, and the, you know, the team concept. I like that too, where you're part of a team, and it wasn't like I was out there by myself, and you know, you have to depend on other people. And obviously in the Marine Corps, you're not out there by yourself. You have one huge team all the time. So that's what really appealed to me, like I say, in the Marine Corps. And I said, I think, in the last probably 30 or 40 years, maybe one or two other people might have gone in the service from Bates.
Thanks,
That's it.
Bill. So Charlie, we're going to come back to you now to talk about what it was like being on the skiing team. During your time at Bates, the ski program made an enormous leap into Division I. Can you tell us about your experience and what that was like?
Okay. I had a kind of a similar experience to Rob in that when I arrived here, we didn't have much of a program. And going back even a year before that, as a sub-frosh, I came up to interview at Bates, and I was, kind of interested, but it turned out to be the blizzard of 1969. And I was supposed to go down to Bowdoin later in the week, and I couldn't get there. And I thought to myself, oh, gee, I want to ski in college. This is the place, And so I arrived at Bates, and fortunately, I got caught with this group of runners over here and ran cross country. And that gave me a lot of really good conditioning. And when the ski season started, I found out pretty quickly that we didn't really have much of a team. There was really one guy, Jay Parker. I don't know if any of you remember Jay from football and maybe tennis. I don't know. No. But wasn't a very good team. But it was a lot of guys that liked to be in the snow. So, okay. So, and I was, I think, the only freshman. I certainly was the only one that lasted any time. And so I said, well, okay, this is great. I got a chance to ski. I'm not very good. My high school career wasn't very good, but at least I can ski. Well, we went to our first Division II meet at Keene State, and there were 4 teams. And at the end of the cross country race, coach says, "Mattis, you're third." And I said, "What?" I just couldn't believe this. And it turns out I was, fairly good as a cross country skier. But we lost that meet, and we lost just about every meet that whole year. The second year, which is depicted in the picture on the left, it was snowing so hard, by the way, that day that I had to take my glasses off. That was taken right out next to Rogerville. And it was the only meet that we ever had on campus. And Coach Flynn, who spent basically all his time trying to figure out where we were going to ski. And we had 3 events. We had alpine, jumping, and cross country. And that was a major job. And then the rest of his time he was spent figuring out where we're going to stay when we were driving to Vermont or up north to Sugarloaf or whatever. And so he decided we'd have this meet here. And that was sophomore year, and all of a sudden we had 9 freshmen on the team, and everybody else was pretty much gone. And that meet I came in second. Eric Tonk Nielsen, who was a Norwegian freshman, won the race. Unfortunately, he only skied with us a year. He was a tremendous skier. But the rest of the guys hung in, and as you see the picture on the right, that's basically Mike Heath and I are right in the middle, and the rest are all underclassmen. And by the end of our junior year, we had finished second in Division II in the championship. And back in those days, if you were in the top 2 in Division II, you got a chance to go to the Division I meet. And if you placed in the top 8 in the Division I meet, then you stayed in Division I. Well, we came in 9th. And as it often happened with skiing, things happen much later than the actual meet. And that summer, we found out not only did we get the Division II championship because New England College had an ineligible skier, but because Harvard had come in 10th in the Division I meet, you don't relegate Harvard, okay? I mean, that's, I guess, a rule now. I don't know. But they decided to expand Division I to 10 teams. So we go from my freshman year having a pretty much ragtag group to, senior year, we're skiing at the Dartmouth Carnival and the Middlebury Carnival and the Williams Carnival and skiing the Division I championship. And it was just an incredible transformation. And, it's basically these guys just had the desire to be out there and to do the absolute best they could. And we never felt as though we were really that great, but, we're in Division I. Now, we talk about legacy, and I noticed a lot of people here mention coaching. How many people here coached at one point or another? Yeah, I mean, that's a legacy, I'll tell you. I did quite a bit of coaching myself, but the other thing that the real legacy, and I'll use this as an example, the skiers that we've had at Bates College have been pretty remarkable. Now, this is an example of one who actually didn't ski Division I because her name was Nancy Ingersoll Fiddler. And at the time she skied, she was class of 78, I believe. 78. Yeah. And she was going to be here today, but I guess had a conflict. But she skied in the AIAW, which I think we'll hear about a little bit later, and was an outstanding skier. Went on to, into her late 20s and early 30s, winning 14 national championships, skiing in 2 Olympics and 3 world championships. And she was instrumental in creating this book, which basically documents the rise of women's skiing from 1972 Winter Olympics to the 2018 gold medal by Jessie Diggins and Keegan Randall. That's just one example. Some of the guys that did go through the program, Justin Freeman, Dave Chamberlain, class of 98, I believe. Justin Easter, outstanding skiers. Freeman and Chamberlain skied in the Olympics. Justin Easter was a qualifier for national championships in cross-country skiing and track 12 consecutive seasons. Every season he was at Bates. And there have been just an awful lot of great skiers coming through this program. And we don't even have a ski hill. We don't have a facility. I mean, just think of that.
We have Mount David. What are you talking about?
What's that?
We have Mount David. What are you talking about?
Mount David, yeah. Well, actually, my junior year, at the end of the season, we had enough snow that we had the Mount David Classic. We had a ski race off the top of the hill. But anyway, it's just, I think about that, and, there's just so many examples of legacy that come out. And but anyway, let's go on and talk about Al Myers. And there's the banner contest, right?
That is Al judging the banner contest.
Yeah. And of course, all of us knew Al. I mean, we'd go into to get our training gear. We had a PIN number before there were PIN numbers, and Al knew them all, right? And he was just the type of guy you could always talk to if he wasn't too busy. I got to know him because he played the guitar and I play the guitar, and we shared our experience with that.
I'll tell one short story about Al. One time we were having Mike Seeger come and do a concert at Alumni Gym, and Al was the opening act. The place is packed. Al Myers does his thing. He finishes, standing ovation. Mike Seeger comes on, everybody left.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks to the 73 panel.
So we're going to have a quick transition here, and the guys up front are going to move back, and we'll have finally some ladies come up front.
Okay, now if everybody's worried about the timing, we are probably going to go a little bit late till 3 o'clock. So if you have to leave and go to your next event, I know some of the musicians have to go to the jam session and prepare. That's okay, but we're going to keep going because we've got the tape, and we're going to put it all on tape and have a video for everybody to look at later. So if you think that women did not participate in sports at Bates during 1973, yes, they did. And here are some of the examples. We had a basketball team, an archery team, a fencing team, a skiing team, a field hockey team, a badminton team, and it's not up there, but we had a bowling team too. So there were women's sports at Bates, but they did feel relegated to second-class status until Title IX. And that's where we begin this program on the 50th anniversary +1 of Title IX.
I think you can hand it over to Sherry, actually. Thank you for that. So this is going to be a little bit more of a conversation rather than question and answer portion. But I will kind of get it started with you, Sherry, since you were here before the enactment of Title IX, but certainly at the start of it. So I'd love for you to talk a bit about what that was like on campus.
Thank you. Welcome. I have to tell you that I probably was here before all of you. I came to Bates in 1968. I graduated from University of Maine, Presque Isle. And it was promised that when I come to Bates, that I would have a lot of good athletes, intelligent athletes, and all the good things. And every word of it was true. I think I was the envy of the Maine coaches that I got to coach the elite. And they were the elite. But in 1968, I thought I was going to be coaching field hockey, and I didn't. I was coaching basketball, which was really my main sport when I was in high school and college. And then, from then on, I transitioned to volleyball, to field hockey, to basketball, to badminton, to bowling, to fencing, track, I stayed, softball, lacrosse. What else was I in? And I said, yeah, okay. And I had to go home and read the book. I had no idea what even lacrosse was. I thought it was one of those racket sports, you know. No. But it wasn't until '72 that things started bubbling. We were in the AIAW Association, and we had a Maine association, which MAIAW, which took after the AIAW. But we were leaning towards joining the NCAA, and things were, Title IX was starting to happen. I don't think in those days that I was really aware that we were second-class citizens or anything like that. I was so busy coaching the girls and getting someplace and just meeting their needs. If they wanted another sport, sure. Where do we put it? I do remember of sitting in a faculty meeting in the athletic department, and we were talking about should we bring in two more sports, softball and lacrosse. And one of the male coaches was going, yeah, and I think just we're worried where the purse strings, where are we going to get the money to support all these teams? But Bob Hatch and his leadership made it happen. And they just kept plugging people in as to where they would coach, and the athletes were super. I mean, they wanted the programs, and they became the stars. Every time we entered a championship, we came home with a trophy. We were probably the most elite team in Maine. We played Orono in our first year in lacrosse, our first year in softball, and we beat them, and we beat them. Then we keep picking them off. So that was kind of good. But those are my experiences with the program. The athletes were super, and have always been super. You couldn't ask for a better student athletes to work with. And I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. Carolyn, what about you? You coached here for 25 years. What was your experience like?
I did. I was a legitimate Title IX hire because I was hired. There had been an indoor track team for 1 year, which Sherry helped coach that. And then I came in to start the varsity women's cross-country program, and then a few years later, the outdoor track program. And so I was reminded frequently that a male had left and I was his replacement. And so it was always, but you're like, so they were still trying to make the money work without a question. As far as Title IX comes, I was graduated from high school in 1972. Weathersfield High School in Connecticut. Is Chucky James here? And so in 1971, I was not allowed anywhere near the track because I was a distraction to the boys. But I did win a state championship that year. And in order to compete, someone from the school had to represent me, so a student teacher drove me up to the meet, dropped me off, and left. And the next year was a little more legitimate. We had a club, but I needed a meet to qualify for the state meet. So there was a big championship for men and boys called the Big B Invitational New Britain. And so I called up the meet director, and I was very shy. And I said, I need a race. I'll run with the boys, I don't care. And he says, you can't do that. And I said, well, can I get a girls' race? Just give me a girls' 800, you know. And he says, well, you need sponsors, you need this. I go, if I get a sponsor, you'll put in the race? And so the guy just like swallowed, like, well, what did I do? Weathersfield, Company 3, Fire Department, girls, 800. And so they had 4 women's events in that year, and the newspaper said it was the first co-ed meet ever in New England. And I guess I started that. So, so again, graduating in '72, I went to Southern Connecticut. They had a women's outdoor track team, but no cross-country or indoors. So my junior and senior years, I ran on the men's cross-country team and the men's indoor track team. And so now I was an NAIA, actually an AIAW All-American for the 800. So I'm coming out of school with a lot of experience. I went to grad school at Penn State as a grad assistant. I got coaching experience. And now all these programs are adding, and Bates was adding, needed track coaches. And so I was one of those few people in the country that had coaching experience, All-American. And they wanted women in the coaching role. So Bates actually wrote to me and said, can you apply for our job? And here I came. So the Bates experience, I mean, every day I just loved what I did. I loved my job. I loved the students. It was always rewarding. We grew as a team. We beat Harvard. Oh my goodness, they were a little surprised at that. But I don't know if Karen Holler's here today, but she was a part of that group. But it was just the Bates athletes, like Sherry said, are passionate and committed and driven to be successful. And we've done tremendous things with modest athletes over the years, without a question.
Thank you. Yeah, do you want to? Yeah, let's go to you, Sue. I guess maybe it is a little bit more of a question and answer. So Sue, you were actually a member on the first track team that Sherry coached, from what I understand. Yep. What was that like?
I can give
Microphone. Sue, will use the microphone.
Okay. So,
You're good. I think you're good. Yeah.
so my high school experience was similar to actually Carolyn's because in where I was in Wayland, Massachusetts, we had the field house for the high school. So everybody in our county came to run in the high school for indoor track meets. And the boys were the only ones running, but I have two sisters, so my senior year in high school, the three of us decided that we were going to start running also. So it was just 1 year after Title IX had passed. So we ran on JV in the boys' meets. So nobody, I guess, could stop us from doing it. So we ran with the boys, competing against them, and because all the other towns were there in the school at the same time, like their brothers were telling the sisters, come on down, it looks like they're letting girls run. So we started out running with the boys, and I think, in the years later, they actually established girls' teams to compete as well. But so pioneerish, I now go into Bates. Bates does not have indoor track either. I also played field hockey and lacrosse in high school. They had field hockey, Sherry was coaching that, so that was very established and a good team there. It wasn't until my sophomore year, so 1975, that indoors we decided just to start a club. So it was me and a few friends of mine, and they were enough supportive. They did supply a coach, so Sherry coached that, along with Webb Harrison, who has been mentioned. After my junior year, so we're now 1977, Webb came up to me, very supportive. So this is something I will say, that all the coaching staff, Walt Slavinsky even, you had mentioned him earlier, supportive. He said, if you write a letter to the administration, you could get it varsity status. So I said, okay, good idea, Webb. So I typed up a letter, the other women on the team signed it, and we sent it in, and so the indoor track got approved as varsity sport. Now, I know Webb did sort of have ulterior motives, but women supporting men, men supporting women, he got a men's lacrosse team out of it. So, to me, it was helping each other. So everybody supporting everybody else, and the sports kept coming after that. So that was the beginning of what you guys got to benefit from in the future.
Can I butt in a little bit here? When, speaking of people benefiting, when I introduced the lacrosse team to Bates College, they wanted to have a lacrosse. I said, okay. And at that point, we had Gloria Crosby, who was the women's administrator. She was the first softball head coach, and I was her assistant. So we all voted for that, and that was good and everything else. Then the next year, Gloria said, okay, now you're going to coach the softball team. You've had a year experience under me, her. And then the lacrosse team, she got out of softball. Lacrosse got booted over to maybe Pat Smith, I think, everything else. So we sort of passed it around. So people kind of benefited from it, but yeah, ulterior motive.
But but we had a program. Right. So, I guess to us it didn't really matter who was coaching it, we at least had one. And, talking about finances, so the reason I wore this shirt, which is the same one in the picture there, right, was field hockey and lacrosse. So you save money, use uniforms. But it was okay. We had a team. And actually a lot of the women that played field hockey also played lacrosse. So it was a lot of the same women.
And it still fits.
Yeah. Carolyn, I would love to hear a bit about how other schools were implementing Title IX in comparison to Bates.
Yeah, so I'm answering that question, I think, because of my job, but you know, I'm a beneficiary since I started in 1979 of all of the people who have come before me, and you know, I work in the athletics for the Ivy League Athletic Conference, and we've done a lot of history, you know, sort of in reviewing things over the past 100 years that I've worked there, and it's interesting that so many of the Ivy League schools, you know, when Title IX was adopted, didn't even have women students, right? So they were having to bring women students into the campus. I know, I've heard all the stories about how there were even no bathrooms on campus that didn't have urinals in them, right? And they were just starting from really scratch. And the women on campus, as you were saying, and other people have said about, you know, becoming and finding a family, there were very few women on campus, and they were able to find each other through athletics, and really, and it's at all the Ivy League schools, really feeling like that was one place where they knew they were, you know, so they could be together and have teammates that would look out for them. They have similar stories that I think we would probably hear here, but even and a little bit even more embarrassing at schools that had so much money that, you know, they had the coach, the one person who was the coaching all of the teams, and she would go to the bookstore and get a T-shirt and iron the letters, the numbers on the back in order for them to go and compete in a contest. You know, so, and I also I know the stories from Dartmouth because I worked there in the 1980s, and the basketball teams, and there were some really good ones back then, but they would have the varsity team, the JV team, the freshman team, basketball teams would all practice, and then the women's team would practice at like 10 o'clock at night. So it's not until really I went to the Ivy League and heard all of these stories about like sort of the really the hardships that really the women had to go through to get what they needed to compete, that I really appreciated how far Bates had come when I was here in 1979. We always had our little complaints that, oh, the football team got steak after they beat Bowdoin or something in the dining room. Like, really? We beat Bowdoin last week. What did we get? Anyway, like I said, those are first world problems, right? If that's what we're worried about. So I think we always felt really well supported. I remember Bob Hatch being at our games and supporting us, and the success that we had, and the one thing that we probably could have used was a real bus to ride around in. I remember we always went to Smith College in field hockey for this like play day kind of a thing, or a bunch of scrimmages at the start of the season. And I remember Sherry, whose name is Yak in my mind, always will be, was driving, and we're like driving around, and it's like, wait, I think this kind of looks familiar. Wait, yes, we were lost here last year because we're looking for the orange roof for the Howard Johnsons, right? I think I blame Janet Bursaw actually is in the back of the room for that one. So we could have used some professional drivers, but other than that, I think we had a fabulous experience.
Thank you, Carolyn. Carla, you were a player and a coach, including softball, for which I played. Can you tell us a bit about how you think Title IX impacted your time at Bates, and also how your hiring as a Bates coach came about?
Sure. So Carla Flaherty, and I graduated in 2003. And so I'm actually currently the head women's basketball coach at Roanoke College, but I began my coaching career here at Bates. I played for the infamous Jim Murphy, Murph Dog, who is near and dear to my heart, and who I think was transformational in who I am. And I also give Bates that credit. The reason I mentioned that I'm at Roanoke is because someone earlier said that you stand on the shoulders of those that come before you. those are the words that are written in my locker room because I believe so deeply in those words. And I think that's a testament to what I'm experiencing and hearing up here, because I did not feel different. I did not feel less than at my time during Bates. I coach in one of the best arenas in the country for Division III. We're hosting the national championship in a couple years. And I try to tell them over and over again that as fabulous as it is for recruiting, there isn't a better game environment than Bates College, because alumni is that special. And as an athlete here, we packed the gym, men and women. Bowdoin was our biggest rivalry. You couldn't get a seat. My freshman year, we went to the NCAA tournament and we weren't allowed to host because the gym wasn't long enough. And they changed the gym that year so that we had the ability to host. So I was part of the transformation, I think. I never felt less than, but when it came to competing, well, gosh, I played basketball and softball when I was here, and I think, again, the fact that women are allowed to compete at the collegiate level and to be involved in multiple sports is just, it's amazing. It's who I am. I am the person I am because of sports. But I think I didn't, as an athlete, understand Title IX because I just always had what everybody else had. And it wasn't until I got into coaching that I realized the true fight that the women had to get what we had, because that's what I experienced as a coach, to fight for my young women, if you will, to make sure that that's passed on. But I got into coaching. Gosh, there's some influential people at Bates College. So I actually graduated. I got a degree in rhetoric. My dad was like, what the heck are you going to do with a degree in rhetoric? And I was like, well, I'm going to talk my way into whatever job I want. And so I actually got a job in finance and moved to San Diego and was working in finance for a year. And I'd never taken an econ class in my life. Working with data was the last math class I took at Bates, and I didn't do very well in that. But Coach Murphy actually sent me a game film from the season, and he was like, can you give me your opinion on this game film? And I was like, I hated California, no offense.
I'm taken.
I was like, I'm a Maine girl, you know? And so I was just writing notes and writing notes and writing notes, giving him my feedback because they were really good. We were really good. And I sent it to him. Lo and behold, I didn't know he took my notes and passed them on to the athletic director. And that transfer of my analysis led to the job creation here at Bates. So the athletic director, at the time, I didn't know this, but there was no female on staff as an assistant at Bates. So they created a spot for me. And so I was to come in and coach soccer with Coach Murphy, basketball, and softball. And I was also to be an intern in the athletic department. So I studied under Suzanne Coffey, who was the athletic director at the time. And they created this position which was fully funded, and I believe now it was fully funded because they didn't have any women on staff and it was a Title IX violation, so they had to give me money. And that's how I started my job. So I had free housing, full benefits, and a salary, which to this day, when I'm hiring, I don't even have that, you know, so Bates really went above and beyond, and that's how I got my foot in the door. I wasn't gonna leave California, but Bates drew me back. Bates is the reason that I got into coaching, and I've been doing it for 20 years, so.
Thank you.
What do you need to do? Okay, we're gonna thanks to the Title IX panel. We really appreciate it. You guys are great. It's fantastic. It's great to have this on video, and we're gonna do more of this at some point. So thank you. But time remaining, we're gonna have the 3s and 8s come up. Okay, 3s and 8s, don't sit there. Come on up here. It's your time. And the Bates historian. Where's the Bates historian? Come on up. I think Shana had to do something personal. I'm not 100% sure. Okay. Okay, we're going to start with Paul Oporowski. And Paul, I know there's a... I have no idea what Shayna's question was for you, but I think she told you what it was. So why don't you just start yakking away?
Is it on? Okay.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it's kinda messed up. I'm going to sort of pick up where Larry Woods spoke about and Lloyd Jagat. So coming into Bates as a sub-frosh, you actually understood how successful the distance program was in cross country and in track and field. I did not run cross country in high school until my senior year. We didn't have it. And you'd think, like, you couldn't find a less expensive sport to have on a program, because all you needed was a pair of shorts and some shoes. And so coming into Bates, a full season in the fall, and then indoor track and then outdoor track, it was like, wow, for somebody who loves to run, this was ideal. 4 years of college, we had 2 undefeated seasons. I was able to have the pleasure of rooming with 2 great runners, Tom Leonard and Rick DeBruin, at my freshman year. And I think at this point, it's probably the fastest freshman room in the history of Bates in terms of, the 3 guys that ran in that and that shared that room. I want to share one story about this sort of talks about what it was like to run at Bates and what it was like to be coached by Coach Slavinsky. So this is junior year. We're running this Eastern Championship at Franklin Park. And the Easterns is, smaller schools. But it was the one time we got to compete against Brandeis, and Walt really hated Brandeis. And so he would give anything to beat Brandeis. And once again, we kind of came up short. Now, we had no problem at all with Coach Slavinsky. He would, there was never a bad word said in terms of getting us motivated to run. And that was the one time he lit into us, as, saying, oh, you guys, you should have won, yon and yon and on. And Oporowski should have been 30 seconds faster in that race. And so from that point on, so this is coming from, Franklin Park all the way back to Bates. We weren't saying much of anything in the car. Fast forward a week later, we go to the New Englands. Same kind of situation. But at that time, unlike today, we were running against Division I, II, and III schools all together. So you had Providence College. That race was actually won by a future gold medalist, or silver medalist, John Tracy. And so I'm in the race, and when you're running, you kind of have this tunnel vision, and you're just running and blocking everything else out. When the course goes through the woods, Roxbury, not a great part of Boston, and out of the woods to my right, I spot this white van coming. I don't know where the hell. I don't know how it came out. I'm like, what's going on here? The window comes down, and there's Walt telling me to go after Frank Richardson from MIT, who was in front of us. Like, all the rest of the coaches are at the finish line. So this guy, I don't know how he got into the woods to begin with. And, so that was, so again, Larry, in terms of the competitiveness, and here's a guy who never ran, but he could, that was it, just, get into his head. Well, he got in my head in that race. Anyway, so I finished the race, and wouldn't you know it, 30 seconds faster than the week before. We were, I believe, 5th in New England. So this is, Providence, Northeastern, UMass, some good teams. And then at that same, he says, I told you, and you're going to go to the Nationals next week, which with NESCAC, you sort of had to bend some rules. So I actually got to fly out to Cleveland, stayed with Bob Chasen, and finished 12th. Made All-American that year, and as they say, the rest is history. So it was these were the best times of my life here running for Bates, running for Walt Savinsky, and sharing all these fond memories with my teammates.
Hi guys, I'm back. Okay, Noah, you are a 3-time winner of the Peter Goodrich Trophy at the Maine State Indoor Track and Field Championships. But how did it feel to win the weight throw national championship in 2008 and have the medal placed around your neck by Matt Capone?
It felt pretty good.
I expected that.
But if we have time, I don't know, I'd like to rewind and kind of reflect on, you mentioned I won the Peter Goodrich Award 3 times. And the Peter Goodrich Award is given to the outstanding field athlete at the State of Maine Championships. And I think early on in my career, when I came to Bates, the State of Maine was my Super Bowl. Bates, Bowdoin, Colby, USM. And the Goodrich Award, if you're a thrower, was the Lombardi Trophy, basically. So I won it 3 times in a row. And an exciting thing was when I was a freshman, my brother Dustin Gother, who graduated in 05, was a senior, and he was an All-American thrower as well. And he had won the Goodrich Award 2 times in a row, and then I won it 3 times in a row. So for 5 years, half a decade, the Gother boys painted the trophy. But I bring that up because I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Joe Woodhead was my throwing coach when I was at Bates. And he passed away 2010 or 11, I should know that, but he was pretty legendary. He coached for 25 years at Bates and has, Rich might know because he works here, but I think 44 All-American awards to his name, which is kind of the pinnacle of D3 track and field. So Coach Woodhead, I don't think he hasn't been talked about yet, but he was kind of a bear of a man, and he was salt of the earth, blue-collar Mainer. And I'll never forget when he recruited me to Bates, he called me up one day, and I guess I was a senior in high school. Calls me up, I wish I could do the accent without butchering it, but he had a pretty harsh Maine accent. He calls me up and,
Just try.
No, like you couldn't say, no, this is Joe, how you doing?
That's pretty good.
But he called me up and he said, no, this is Joe Woodhead. It was like a 2-minute conversation. He's, we have a pretty good program here at Bates. I heard you were thinking about coming. I think if you came here, or he said, I know if you came here, you'd be an All-American athlete. And it's like the most smug thing you could possibly say, but I was a chubby, insecure high schooler. So I hear that and I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. Let's do that, right? He goes, I think you could be a national champion. So I'm like, I'm all in, right? Because I'm a kid. He says that and I'm like, yeah, let's go. Fast forward, my senior year, really interesting kind of dynamic that played out was Al Farashidin was the longtime head coach at Bates, and he took a sabbatical second semester my senior year, so we needed an interim coach to fill the gap. And Matt Capone, he had just graduated, and he was from Auburn, and the administration made the questionable decision to have a 22-year-old lead our track and field program, but he was a great guy. He played football at Bates. His dad, Skip, was a coach at Bates for like 30 years, football coach at Bates for 30 years, and Matt was all New England sprinter. And he was my roommate my junior year, so he was a year ahead of me. And Capone it was just kind of funny that he was my head coach my senior year because we were roommates the year before, and we got into a lot of trouble on campus. And my senior year, he lived off campus. We got into a lot of trouble off campus. And then going to nationals, Joe Woodhead was kind of advanced in age, so he didn't travel out with us. So it was just me and my best friend, Matt Capone, going out to nationals. So it was kind of a funny dynamic there, and we got into a lot of trouble in Ohio. But I won, and it was kind of a surprise. I feel like I had a good year, but winning nationals was like, I almost get emotional now because it was a big deal. And as the coach of Bates, Capone gets to hand out the awards to everyone on the podium, and I just get emotional because he was like crying, he was so happy. So it was my best friend giving me the trophy. It was really cool. And then I'm almost done. I know we're short on time. After I won, the head official gave me the I guess like the scorer sheet, right? It's like the piece of paper, NCAA, my name's on it, number 1, circles my name, and he's like, you might like this as a little memento. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I figure I'll give this to Joe Woodhead. That would be like cool for him. So I come back to campus after winning, and I'm just like in the sky. I'm so happy. And I give it to Joe, and in my head, it's like he's gonna, engloss this on like a piece of wood and hang it up in his shed. And it's gonna be like a great thing. It'll be like in his home office or something. And he folds it up 8 times and puts it in his back pocket. And he just looks me dead in the eye, shakes my hand, and winks at me. And he was like a winker, old school. Winks at me, Noah, good job. And he just kind of walks away. So it's just fun, like, it's 4 or 5 years before that, there was a phone conversation. I know you'll be an All-American, and I think you could win nationals. And then he's kind of like that Bill Belichick guy. That was just the job. Do your job, right? And that was the job. And we did it, and we worked our asses off to get there. But for him, there was no parade or anything like that. Joe was just so old school. So it was kind of a funny juxtaposition of Matt Capone, kind of like my best friend on campus, giving me the plaques, or giving me the plaque, and then Joe just, he was so accomplished. He's like, yeah, thanks for nothing. But it's kind of, so he's just, yeah, so many people. I'm honored to be here, and so many throwers before me kind of set the tempo, and then so many throwers you'll hear from David kind of accomplished just so much more than I ever could. So I'm honored to be here, and that's just kind of a glimpse into my Bates experience.
Thank you. So David, you were the NCAA Division III National Shot Put Champion 3 years in a row. But you noted that a special moment to you was the team winning the New England Division III Track and Field Championship. Can you tell us about that?
Thanks, Shayna. So I first wanted to start off with just an expression of gratitude. The legacy is strong here at Bates College, and everyone in this room is a part of that. So thank you, and thank you so much for putting this together. It's kind of funny. Sometimes I'll go on a slight tangent. I try to think about where the inspiration started for track and field, and Ethan and Chris, Rich, Noah, Dustin, Jamie Soller. I keep going further back in time. The lineage of Bates throwers and Bates track and field athletes is too long to say that it begins or ends at any given point in time. It is continuous. When I think about my experience here at Bates, I kind of want to describe a feeling, something that really occurred during the transformation between my freshman and my senior year on the Bates track and field team. It was a palpable energy, and I'll illustrate it with one story from the Division III New England Outdoor Championship in 2013, the first time that Bates ever won New England Division III Outdoors. So we had a lot of success in 2011 with multiple All-American awards from Chris, Ethan, myself, and the team energy was building over that point in time. We had individuals like David Hardison, James LePage, Eric Kimball, Sam Goldstein, et cetera, that were really rounding out everything that we were doing in this track and field program. So we come to May of 2013. I think there might have been 25 PRs that day across the board. I myself set New England records in the hammer and the shot put that day. I won the discus with a PR as well. And I think those records still stand at Colby. I hope they stand for a long time. So it comes down to the final event, the 10,000 meters. And we had been competing against MIT as our major rival for years prior to this. They had an extremely strong distance program. I guess you have to do something when you have so much of a workload, so you can blow off some steam while running. We get into that race, and Tully Hannon, class of 2015, he rolls to a win in like 31 low or something like that. There are 5 other MIT runners that are in the race, and we also have senior captain Eric Kimball. Eric has qualified for that race just the weekend before. It's the first time that he's made it to New England Division IIIs, and he's trailing the pack for the majority of the race. Now during that, it's the last event. We're neck and neck with MIT. I think the scores were pretty much even, and it's a toss-up between who will win and who will be second, but you're not entirely sure of what that point tally will be because of how many runners are in the race itself. Eric, trailing the pack, starts to pick off these MIT runners one by one, and with 800 meters left, he's sitting, I think, in probably 12th or 13th place, and he's got a pack that's about 100 meters ahead of him. He makes his progress down the track. The Bates track and field team gathers on the infield. It's all of us. We're all screaming. It's an electric moment. With 100 meters left, he runs down Matthew Dio. He finishes in 31:43.11. That guy finishes in 31:44. Bates, 144 points. MIT, 143. Bates. In fall workouts, those early mornings in the wintertime, in the pool workouts during the middle of the week, the team was fully bought into that year. It was really something that was special. And so I had a lot of individual accomplishments that I'm really proud of, but none that I'm more proud of than being part of that team.
Thank you, David. Sue, I'm going to come back to you. You played on the first ever lacrosse team for women at Bates. Do we need more microphones? I hear that only 4 of you on the team had ever played before. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. So, yes, that's true. And out of those 4, one of them was actually Nancy Ingersoll, who was mentioned earlier before. So she had played lacrosse in Weston and switched over to the cross-country skiing after that, so just that 1 year. I don't have any actually bad memories about the first years of the lacrosse team. So the coach, like Sherry had mentioned, she was the coach. She had never coached lacrosse before. We only had 4 girls that had ever played the sport before. I was recruiting my roommate, my friends to come join the team. They had never played before. But other people have already mentioned the athletics here at Bates is not necessarily about, the champions that there's a lot of here that I am not one of. But everybody supported everybody else. We love the sport, so people enjoyed playing it. I believe, even though Sherry said we beat UMO, I don't think so. I think we lost every single game that first year. A few years later, maybe we won a few, but it was just, the administration was supportive. I already said this, and everybody just enjoyed playing the sport. So there is an award. Pat Smith, who had experience and did come and coach later, she encouraged those of us of the class of 78 to come up with an award. So you'll see there is a Spirit of 78 lacrosse award. I don't know if there's anybody here that has actually won it. But it was all about those women who had just that kind of spirit. So the award is not for somebody that's an outstanding player. It's just your, regular cheerleader type player that's on the team. So that's kind of, to me, what Bates Athletics is all about. You don't have to be a star athlete. It's just participating, and you can get a lot out of it anyway.
I can attest to that. I played softball, but I also did not win any championships. Carla, you were one of my coaches and one of my favorites. You played basketball and softball, but you were an absolute superstar on the basketball team. What was it like when you hit that 1,000 point mark?
I need to say this. So as a Mainer, when I tell again, I'm a basketball coach, so I recruit kids all the time, and I'm like, please don't do what I did. And I grew up right next to the University of Southern Maine, and at the time, they were hosting national championships, competing for national championships, and my dad was like, when you play for USM, they all went to UMaine, so they wanted me to be in the UMaine system. I'm the only one that broke the mold in my family, and I mean aunts, uncles, sisters, parents, everybody went to UMaine. And my dad, when my mom just dragged me to Maine Day. And I was like, I am not going to live in Lewiston. I am not going to Bates. I'm not doing it. And she's like, you need to go. And so I'm like, ugh, okay. Because you know what? They have a good basketball team. They might have a chance at beating USM. That was my whole goal in high school, was finding a school that could beat USM. And so I came on Maine Day, and I sat in on a geology class, and they simulated glacier movement using pancake batter on a projector. You know those things. You guys actually can speak my language. My students have no idea what I'm talking about. And then the faculty member fried up those pancakes and served the class breakfast. And I was like, I am in. I love it. And my dad, when I said I want to go to Bates, was like, well, why don't you actually pick a school you can get into? So then it was on, because I am a competitor, so I went early decision, and hopefully there was a tip used. Now I know what that actually means later on in life, but they helped me get in, but Bates shaped my life, and basketball in this journey, like, I scored 1,000 points because I never saw a shot I didn't like, right? Like, if you shoot a lot are gonna go in. That's just the fact of the matter. But listening to you guys talk about camaraderie, right? Like, we were good. We didn't lose to, Colby. We never lost to Williams. We never lost to Amherst. But gosh dang it, I freaking hate Bowdoin. And it took me 20 years, and I'm talking like deep hatred. It took me a long time to get over that. And I'm sharing this story because my dear friend is the women's basketball coach here at Bates College now. And I was really happy at Roanoke. I met my husband. I was there for a year when this job opened up, and Bates had always been my dream. I was gonna come back here. I'd started coaching here, and this is where I was gonna be. So I called my friend who, the Bowdoin coach at the time was a Bates alum. And she was like, you've got to meet Al. Like, she's fantastic. And we were both like, no, we hate each other, because we'd been competing against each other for 4 years. And we went to a Final Four together, and we were in a club, started dancing, and she was like, you need to just talk to her. And so I was like, ugh. And as soon as we started dancing, I was like, dang it, I like you. You're a cool person. And from that moment on, we were best friends. And so when this job opened up, I called her and was like, this is your job. You are the best person for this. And I cannot believe I'm saying that about a Bowdoin grad who I competed against. So she got the job, and I shared my, back in the day when there were newspapers and your mother clipped everything and saved those articles, there was an article of her and me and a ball. And when I say we're ripping each other's faces off, we are ripping each other's faces off. She's clawing me here, I'm clawing her there, and I've sent that to her and framed it. And I'm sharing that because, like you just said, it's more about the individual accolades don't matter. It's the team memories. It's everything that you have. And I think Bates is the foundation for who we are. And I'm forever grateful for that and my experience here.
So thank you guys. Thank you guys so much. We're done with this panel. We're going to move on. Bob, you as the Bates athletic historian, just if you wanted to go over some of the things you've been working on and to share with us. And I hear you might also have some fun stuff for us to look at. Thank you, guys.
So it says athletics historian. I took one history class at Bates. It was with John Cole, and I recall we read the autobiography of Ben Franklin, which to this day is probably my favorite book, or one of my favorites, so that was impactful. I've done a lot of research on turn of the century, early 1900s, Bates athletic history, and it kind of started in support of Ira Waldman's quixotic quest for there to be a Hall of Fame here. So,
Did you say quick?
quixotic quest.
Means it started a long time ago and still hasn't happened.
So I was a little bit of a journalist, but Ira kind of taught me how to research. Like Bates students are all digital, and the Mirror yearbooks are all digital, and newspapers.com, you can get anything. So Ira kind of taught me how to research. So I started digging in. I liked baseball history, and I was aware that there was a baseball player named Harry Lord, who I'd come across in all these books about Ty Cobb and stuff, and it said Bates College graduate, Bates College graduate. So I wanted to research his life. So that kind of got me going. So then I started researching other people, and here's some things I learned. The fellow that hit the first home run on Garcelon Field in 1899, became Jack Kerouac's doctor in Lowell, Massachusetts. His name was Nathan Pulsifer. The fellow that scored the first touchdown on Garcelon Field in 1899 became the head of the American Bar Association, 35,000 member American Bar Association, and he took on FDR head to head over a court packing scheme that FDR wanted for his New Deal, and FDR backed down. In 1904 at Bates, there were two fellows who went on to be Major League Baseball players. They were in the same backfield for Bates College. And not only did both of them become Major League Baseball players, then Harry Lord and a guy named Bob Messenger, they were two of the fastest players in Major League Baseball. Both of them won speed awards at different field days along the way. So that blew my mind. Lord, the guy who I mentioned I was curious about, as I researched, it turns out he was not a Bates College graduate, despite what Wikipedia said, and he wasn't a pitcher, but he ended up becoming, he stayed at Bates for 1 year, and it actually ended up dropping out. He played 10 games. He played the whole football season. It was pretty good. A couple touchdowns against Colby. Got kicked out of the game for fighting. Played 10 baseball games, and then dropped out of Bates and played for this minor league team called the Portland Pine Tree Association team, and played against Bates that season. So for 10 games, he's playing for Bates, and then all of a sudden he's getting paid $25 a game and playing against Bates. And Bates has someone who is in the Basketball Hall of Fame, is in the second class ever of the Basketball Hall of Fame. So all of these information, it was like fascinating, peeling layers of an onion, and it kind of blew my mind, all this stuff. So I do have a show and tell here. So this is called the Pulsifer paperweight. Bates went undefeated in 1898, one of only 2 or 3 teams in Bates history ever, and they had never beaten Bowdoin. But on that day, they beat Bowdoin 6-0, and this paperweight, the Pulsifer paperweight, so it was donated by the grandsons of Pulsifer, who are Bowdoin grads, actually, and it says the play that won the game, October 28th, 1898, and it's Pulsifer is blocking, and a fellow named Saunders, William Allen Saunders, scores the touchdown. Now, Saunders went on from Bates to be a legendary professor at Storer College, historically black college in West Virginia. And here's a book that was written about him recently. So these kinds of stories are like unbelievable to me. I can't. And they've been well received. So first I'd like to thank Jay Burns, who is the director of communications. He's helped this. Aaron Morse have helped with this research, and it means a lot. Because I got an email, and I'm getting a little emotional now, because Howie Vandersea had read one of my stories, Howard Vandersea, and what's that? Oh, and he reached out and said, I enjoyed one of your stories, and I was like, wow, if I'm reaching a guy like Howie Vandersea. And he took the time, and he died recently, and his number's going to be retired, but other, you know, Brooks Quimby's grandnephew, who Paul Holt, class of '64, has read these kind of stories and reached out. Ty Cobb's great-grandson actually read a story. So these stories have been published in through Bates, but also I'm a member of something called the Society of American Baseball Researchers, SABR. And it turns out this Bates guy, Harry Lord, played in the first All-Star game. So I get an email from Ty Cobb's great-grandson. You know, it shed some light on a pocket watch that he had, this research. So, and just recently, actually just yesterday, I met with the granddaughter of Harry Lord, this Bates guy I keep bringing up. And, you know, she showed me his first contract with the Boston Red Sox. So he went on to be the captain of the Red Sox, the captain of the White Sox. Ty Cobb and he were rivals. So I sat down in their living room, you know, and went through his scrapbooks yesterday. And I tried not to spill the pastry I was eating onto the original Red Sox contract, and I may have, or the coffee and stuff. But so it's very gratifying, and so I don't know if it's helping Ira's quest to get a Hall of Fame. It doesn't seem to be happening. But I have a little goal myself. I'd love to see a statue of called Teammates. There were two African Americans, Saunders and a guy named Bruce. And Bruce became a national figure. He died young. And they were, and this guy Pulsifer, who's on the paperweight, and a guy named Purinton, who was Bates' first athletic director, who died in World War I. I'd love to see a statue of these four men outside of Garson. And so that's my goal.
But hey, Bob. You know, as all of you can see, there are passions of Bob and mine in Bates athletic histories, and not just the more recent ones, and not just even the less recent ones, but the way back ones. We don't want these people to be forgotten. And we think there's a lot that we can do to develop the athletic histories of every Bates team over time. This is just the start. I've been fighting the battle for several years. It'd be great to have a Bates College Athletic Hall of Fame. I think we'll get it done before I die. So, I don't know how long that'll be, but I think we'll get it done. But we are going to be working on developing the ability of every athlete at Bates to be able to provide their experiences and their memories in some format that we can use and we can preserve and we can go back and we can review over time. So this program is just a start, and more to come in the future. Thank you all very much for attending. It's been great.
Hey, again, I'd just like to commend Ira for putting this together. It's been outstanding. Appreciate all you being here. You'll be hearing from him and us, and if you know anybody in class of 74 or 75, they'll be hearing from us because we'd like to see this continue.